When Pastor Dan asked me to share, as I usually do in August, I was a little hesitant this year. As some of you know, I've had some big changes in my life over the last year. And I wasn't confident I could stand up here and I could give a message. I think typically when I come up here, I have one piece of paper. This time, for whatever reason, I decided to type out what I thought I was going to say, and so I have a whole book almost here. We'll see if I stay on task. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Elder Mike Koltun for the English congregation. I thought that maybe I would start with a short update, a bit of a testimony, so to speak. I'll go to the passage that's in the bulletin afterwards. Even in the best of times, you probably remember that I would tear up during a message, so just treat it as normal. And if I stop for a little while, you can be confident that eventually I'll start up again. Let's pray first. And if it's not your habit to pray during a whole message, today would be a good day to start. Heavenly Father, Lord, you are a rock, you are a hope, you are a great reward, and you are the one who lifts us up in all situations. Pray that you would be with all of us today, that you would speak through me, Lord, and that you would give me the strength to preach your word today. Amen. So, as I said, this is the first time I've spoken in front of the congregation since last summer, and much has happened that has given me a new appreciation in particular for the frailty of life, the fragility of life. And I'd like to share with you in a little more detail the last year. I should have had Alex take an extra song or two. If I start to break down a little, we could have had him come up here. But as many of you know, last year was on or around November 9th. It was a day like any other day for me. Woke up. Thought I'd make it a little further than this. Said my prayers with my wife of 32 years. And went off to work. And like many of you, we don't really expect anything extraordinary to happen on any particular day. I know I didn't. We had talked about going for a walk that afternoon. With our friends, the Ackermans. And Jane was she headed off to the Y, as she did probably 4 or 5 times every week. She may be the most dedicated workout person we knew. A short while later, when I got to work, just again like any other day, I turned my computer on, started to think about the tasks I had for the day, and almost simultaneously, my cell phone and my office phone began to ring. One was a staff member from the YMCA. One was one of our congregation members who was at the workout with Jane. And the message was that the paramedics were taking her to Torrance Memorial Hospital. At this point, I got in my car, and those of you who know Jane well, I presumed she had just overdone it, that she'd probably become dehydrated, and that she'd be fine in short time. I went into the emergency room, was unexpectedly rushed in immediately, introduced not to a nurse, which I expected, but to a brain surgeon. That's when I realized that this was more serious. How you doing up here? The doctor asked for permission to perform emergency brain surgery to relieve the pressure. And that evening, Jane was airlifted to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center because Torrance Memorial didn't really have the specialist to deal with the severity of the injury. When we got to Cedars-Sinai, and I met with the doctor, she had told me that she had never seen someone with that amount of bleeding regain consciousness, but that there was always hope, and she had asked for 10 days to see if any progress took place. It's interesting because in our small group at the time, and you can see the Lord working in these situations, we were studying a book called What to Say When You Don't Know What to Say. The Lord has a bit of a sense of humor. And I didn't realize that he was preparing me, because no one does know what to say in those situations. And I could kind of compare myself to that book to see what I was going through and how to get through it. Well, during the study, without prompting, Jane had talked about how she did not want to be on life support. I wasn't the only one who had these discussions with her. This was her tendency. She discussed this with everyone. I think that everyone who had been at the hospital could have given the doctor the same instructions that I had, which was a comfort. Had she not spoken to me about it, I think it would have been even much more difficult. Members of this congregation and family members flooded the waiting room. It was like being at a Eric Clapton rock concert. The place was packed. I don't think the hospital had ever seen anything like it. They were very patient with us, at least at first, and we spent nights there, Abby laughing. Many of you prayed with us, kept vigil, all hours of the day. And this continued for 10 days, at which time Jane went peacefully. To be with the Lord. I don't know if any of you have ever thought about what it would be like in a situation like that. Because we see people go through these situations. and you wonder what it would be like. And the pain, the grief, the sorrow, the sense of loss were far more than I could have imagined. My son Zach and his wife Jessica came down to be with me for a couple months. Zach had never worked in the LA office of his little firm, but they allowed him to come and work out of Los Angeles for a couple months. Abby was given a few months to make up a couple of her classes, and so we were all home. I was not looking forward to the end of January when I was going to be home. By myself. It had been 32 years since I was in that situation. The Lord knew that I needed to be busy. And so He decided to fill my time. That summer, when I was going to visit a supplier in Seattle, out of the blue, one of the ladies who works in our small business office asked me to invite a gentleman from Cal State LA to come and speak. I thought, all right, at least I won't have to do as much that day. And I don't even remember the lesson that he gave the company where we were at. But I do remember is afterwards we went to lunch, and I looked over and he was praying. And I said to him, "Are you a believer?" Turned out he is not only a professor at Cal State LA, but he's a pastor of a Mandarin church in Orange County. And so we hit it off right away. You know how sometimes you meet somebody and they become instant friends almost right away. That day, he offered me a job teaching at night at Cal State LA. What is interesting is I had seen him teach. He had never seen me teach. So I'm not sure what he was thinking. I even thought that he was possibly joking, so I just, maybe in a Chinese way, said, "Oh, that's nice, yes." To my surprise, about a month later, I got a packet in the mail that was about an inch thick, and I'm going, "What the heck is this?" You may be back. And so I had a job working for Cal State LA last semester in the evenings. He had told me that he had taught the class, but he was going on sabbatical, so it shouldn't be very difficult. What he didn't tell me was that the text he had used was 10 years old and been revised twice, and that he wanted me to use the new book. Every night when I got home from Northrop, I spent about 4 hours preparing for my Cal State LA class. But it did kind of keep my mind off of things. I had also picked up a part-time job teaching at a little school called Pacific Lutheran. That job I had gotten inadvertently also. Abby went to school there. I had hit it off with the principal, and he had called and said, "Would you like to teach a personal finance economics class for us?" I said, "Sure. I need to learn how to say no one of these days." And so I had that class. So at lunchtime, I would drive over to Gardena. In the evening, I was out in Los Angeles. I'm not sure I slept for 3 months. But it got me through a very difficult period. The families at the school I'm very close to, the principal and the staff are like a second family as well. And over time, the sense of pain and grief have started to dissipate. The sense of loss will never go away, I'm sure. So I know through your prayers and through God's mercy that I can make it through this. Your witness was strong at the hospital. Multiple doctors commented me that they'd never seen such an outpouring of love and support in their many years. And I thank you for that. The song that we sang today, "It Is Well With My Soul," I don't know how many of you are really familiar with that, but it was written by a man named Horatio Spafford. And I had known the background on this song, but again, I hadn't been through any real tragedy in my life, and so it was hard for me to comprehend what he had written. But Horatio Spafford was an attorney in Chicago. This was in the 1870s. The Great Chicago Fire had ruined him financially. He had invested significantly in property in Chicago. Not a good thing to have done during the fire. So he had planned to travel to Europe with his family. At the last second, he decided to delay, and he sent his family ahead. If he hadn't been through enough while crossing the Atlantic, the ship sank that his family, his wife and his daughters, was on. And it sank rapidly after collision with a sea vessel. All of his daughters died. He got a message from his wife that said, "Saved alone." Just her. Shortly afterwards, as he traveled to meet his wife, he was inspired to write the song that we sang this morning. And knowing that background, I had always wondered how he was able to write that song in his situation. But as you read the words, it's not hard to imagine. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll. Almost sucks you in with that second line after giving you the peace like a river. Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to know, it is well with my soul. But Lord, 'tis for thee, thy coming we wait. I don't think we sang this verse. The sky, not the grave, is our goal. O trump of the angel, O voice of the Lord, blessed hope, blessed rest of my soul. That song has been a great comfort to me over the last almost 10 months now. People have asked me a lot of questions over the last 10 months. Feel free to ask me any question. I try to answer them, although unfortunately I think this is an experience you have to live to get the full benefit from. People ask me how I'm doing. I could answer it as well with my soul. And that is true. I've been blessed by a congregation of people who love and care for me. If any of you ever wonder, or if you've known anyone who thought they could be a Christian and just do it from home, they're wrong. When everything's going fine, you can be a Christian anywhere you want. But when you have trials, you need to be around. Your church family. I'm certainly much more emotional than I used to be. Abby and I have to be careful what we watch. On TV, We've developed new rules in our house. We don't watch anything sad. Sometimes it sneaks up on us. We were watching Hawaii Five-0, the new series. I don't know if any of you have ever wept during that show. I have. In the past, I don't think I was particularly empathetic. And now, for both good and bad, I can empathize with what people are going through during trials. Even if it's a TV show. Some have asked me what my plans are. I think of Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. I don't know what he has planned. I don't know what good he plans on working from this. Those of you who know me well know I like to plan things. I'm not super organized, but I do like to plan. When Jane and I first got married, I had 5-year plans for everything. We were going to buy a house in 5 years. We'd have a kid in 5 years. We'd have a boy and a girl. We ended up getting a house the first year because Jane was not a waiter. I was a planner. She was a doer. For many years now, I had planned to retire when I turned 58, and it would spend more time with family. And I've still planned to retire from Northrop next January. I expect I will teach a couple of classes, but I'm open to whatever the Lord has in plan for me right now. But he's going to have to pick me up and move me to what he wants to do, because I want to make sure that I'm not doing anything on my own at this point. One gentleman asked me if I was mad at God. The answer to that is no, but I had to read the book of Job several times for an attitude check. When I started to think about which passage to speak on today, I was going to take the easy route and avoid this topic, but I couldn't do it. He pointed me into this particular section of the book of Luke. I have to apologize to Pastor Dan. This is a few weeks ahead of where he is in Luke, so he's either going to have to do it again or skip around it when he gets there. I thought I was going to maybe make it through verse 34, but I don't think I'm going to make it through verse 22. This is regarding the parable of the rich fool. I had do not worry as well, and I'm certainly not going to get there. For whatever reason, over the last 10 months, the Lord has pointed this passage to me. So Jesus said, someone in a crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." This is Luke chapter 12, verse 13. Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbitrator between you?" And then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" This is how it'll be with whoever stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. I broke this into 3 sections, verses 13 through 14. Someone in the crowd asked Jesus a question, which he doesn't specifically address. Second section, Jesus gives a principle and a parable about a fool. That's verses 15 through 20. And then Jesus gives us a warning in verse 21. In section 1, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" So the background, because I skipped ahead of Pastor Dan in this case, in the beginning of chapter 12, we were told that Jesus is in the middle of a very large crowd. Thousands of people trampling on each other. Jesus is teaching in the midst of that crowd. Jesus speaks to the disciples regarding hypocrisy. He speaks regarding their fear of the Pharisees, who they can see, and their lack of fear of God, who they can't see, but can actually banish them to hell for eternity. He reminds them, or he warns them, that those who would admit Jesus in front of others, Jesus will acknowledge before God, and that those who are embarrassed regarding Jesus on earth, Jesus will disown. In the midst of all this, someone calls out to Jesus to be an arbitrator to his family. He recognizes Jesus' authority as a rabbi or a teacher, but most likely not as the teacher. Picture yourself in a concert again. There's thousands of people squishing each other, and one of you decides in the middle of that to call out a question to one of the people on stage. Odds are you don't expect that person is going to respond to you. Maybe you ask them to throw you a t-shirt. In this particular case, the man asked a fairly private matter to Jesus in this very situation. And Jesus chose not to address and to answer his question directly. It does seem like a selfish request, doesn't it? He could have asked something that would have benefited the whole group. But at that point in time, the man, and I presume his brother was there, chose to ask the teacher to solve a family problem. Jesus rejects the man's request and says that it's not up to him to judge. In his first coming, he came as Savior, Messiah. His judging will come during his second coming. So it wasn't time for him to judge, and he rejected the question. But he didn't waste the opportunity to teach a lesson to the crowd, to the disciples, and to the brothers. In the second section, Jesus gives a principle and a parable. Jesus said to them, "Watch out." Who is them? I read some commentaries. They thought it could be the disciples. It could be the brothers. It could be the crowd. Who knows? But we do know it is us. This message was placed in God's word that we might hear it and take warning. The principle was, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in abundance of possessions. Webster's dictionary defines greed as a selfish and excessive desire for more of something than is needed. It implies a certain selfishness that enables one to look beyond the need of others. The brothers didn't care what was going on with the crowd, only about their situation. This verse seems to point to material greed, but it talks about all types of greed, so we could expand a little. Material greed is possessions, those things you can see, you can touch. Power We could be greedy for power. All the way back in the beginning of the Bible, Adam and Eve, they had everything they needed. They only had one rule, but they wanted to be like God. So in their greed, they listened to the serpent and sinned. And we've all been sinning ever since. Influence. We want to have influence over people. We want to be important, well-known. We're greedy for free time. We all work, we're busy, but we'd love to have more free time. Praise. Everybody likes some praise, but some people crave praise, and they want more and more of it. Food. Gluttony. There's so many things that we can be greedy about. If life doesn't exist in the abundance of possessions, what does it consist of? Certainly the man in this parable thought that life consisted of the things he had. And in our culture, is that not true? What's that old expression, keeping up with the Joneses or the Smiths? Having what your neighbors have? It's hard not to get caught up in it, in a sense. Abby and I have been cleaning up our house for 10 months now. And I wouldn't consider us hoarders. Some of you laughing. Jane truly brought things in the house and she passed them on to others. She was a blessing to many. But as we've gone through the house, I'm astonished at some of the things we have. We're on a BFF basis with the guy at Salvation Army. He always comments on the color of my car. It worries me a little, but he recognizes us. In John 17:3, we're told, "Now this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent." In Romans 8:11, "And if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of the Spirit who lives in you." And in Philippians 1:21, "For me to live is Christ and to die is gain. If I'm going to live in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me." Think about how ironic this is. Those two men were speaking to the Savior. They were speaking to the one who could bring true life. And yet they were asking for him to arbitrate a dispute on inheritance. And when he told them this parable, the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain." I admit I had to laugh when I read that second verse. Not because I wouldn't have done it, but how many of you would think to tear down your barns and build bigger ones to store your excess? I mean, you would have rented some space or something, but this guy was going to tear down and build up. He had a huge crop that overwhelmed his storage capacity, as any competent businessman would do today. He appears to have thought about how to brainstorm and solve his problem. This man is not atypical for how we operate today. Maybe he's consulted other farmers to see if they have excess space. Maybe he's actually wanted to see if any of them want to participate in his success. We don't know. He does, however, develop a plan to support his unexpected crop outtake. We aren't given any reason to expect that this man isn't a good husband or neighbor. Maybe he's well respected in the community. In today's society, there would be books about this man. He would be emulated. We don't know if the other farmers in the area have the same success. Maybe all the land is good. Or maybe this particular farmer has developed techniques, or so he thinks, to develop crops far and above what everybody else does. So far, I don't really see a big problem, but things turn worse quickly. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. While I was thinking about this verse, I thought of somebody else in the Bible who built some big storage barns. Way back in the book of Genesis. All my Sunday schoolers would know this story. I think most of you do. But we'll kind of summarize it a little anyway. Many of you are familiar with the story of Joseph, who I almost hate to go back to because his faith was so strong. He usually convicts me, and he does here as well. As a young man, Joseph was his father's favorite son. And as a result, his older brothers hated him. They ended up selling him to a band of traders and presumed that he would never be seen again. Those are bad brothers. If any of you think you've got tough family relationships, go back and look at Joseph because he'll convict you as well. He ended up being a slave and was later in prison due to some false charges. It was bad enough that he'd been a slave and been in prison. Somebody had to lie about him to make it worse. But we're told all this time the Lord blessed all that Joseph did, and he found favor with those in charge. While in prison, God helped Joseph interpret some dreams. This was for a couple men who seem almost like a side passage in the story. Joseph had asked the second man to tell the Pharaoh about him when the man was returned to his position. Of course, the man forgot, and so Joseph continued to sit in jail. But as God worked his ways, the Pharaoh had a need for somebody with this particular skill set. No one else could fit the bill. So Joseph was called before the Pharaoh to interpret his dreams. He could have taken that glory for himself. The Pharaoh would have been perfectly happy to acknowledge that Joseph was a wonderful man with a unique skill set. But Joseph pointed out that those dreams were interpreted from the Lord above. Joseph gave some excellent advice to this Pharaoh. The dream was for 7 years there would be 7 years of good crop. For 7 years there would be a famine afterwards. The plan was to build big barns. Not too different from our parable on the surface. But there were many differences if you compare these two stories. Joseph recognized where the dream interpretation had come from. The man in this parable failed to recognize where his wealth had come from. There's no mention of him acknowledging God for what he had. This is common today. It can even be common amongst ourselves. Do we always give God the glory and thank him for the things that we receive? It's easy for me to go through the day and to think that I'm doing things on my own. The fool clearly didn't understand the purpose of his wealth. Israel had lots of laws regarding how to take care of the poor, how to give to the Lord. This man seemed to not know any of those laws or rules. He clearly didn't have a heart that would take care of those who were in need. Joseph, on the other hand, filled those barns for 7 years with grain. At the end of the 7 years, that grain was used to not only take care of the people of Egypt, but in God's larger plan, he took care of the people of Israel, who would have probably died in the famine had Joseph not been faithful. This man assumed that he would have many years to enjoy the fruits of his success. In the United States, the average lifespan for a woman is 81.2 years. For men, it's 76.4. That used to sound like a long time to me. As I'm approaching 60, it doesn't sound like that old an age. Somebody tried to tell me I was middle-aged the other day, and I told them they didn't know math. We're fooling ourselves in many cases. It wasn't until last November that I emotionally realized, as well as intellectually realized, that every day could really be our last. This man did not realize that, and the Lord called him on account. What's funny is, it isn't stated, but it seems likely the fool didn't realize that he would be leaving everything behind. He had no idea how long he was going to live, and yet he accumulated and accumulated. Odds are he would have never, had he lived a long life, been able to use everything he had. In the finance class I teach at the high school, there's this book called, actually in a small study we did as well, Money, Possessions, and Eternity. The author recalls a story about John D. Rockefeller. So John D. Rockefeller, one of the wealthiest men in all of America in history, he died. A reporter asked his accountant, how much did John D. leave behind? And the answer was, all of it. He didn't take any of it with him. And we seem to forget that. The other thing here, and I didn't really have it written in the notes, if you think about the material and the immaterial, you can see everything that you have now. And I'm not going to be in that second section, verses 23 through 34, so Alex may have to look at his songs at the end. But we can't use everything that we have. In the next passage, when Pastor Dan gets there in a few weeks, he'll give you some helpful insight on that. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. What does it mean to be rich towards God? We talked about the various types of greed. Monetarily, it can be you're giving to the church or people who are in need. That's more obvious. What about your time? Do you give your time richly to God? Or do you hoard your time and use it for yourself? Are you jealous of it for free time or to spend with your family? I know that's certainly an inclination with me. There are many things that we can hold on to ourselves and not be generous to God with. This man spent his life building up wealth on earth. He failed to realize that God is sovereign over all things, including the number of years that we live. God cut this man's life short due to his greed, his hoarding. And this man couldn't take anything with him. It's interesting in this parable that the man's not condemned for storing things up. He's condemned for not being generous with God with the things that he has. In the U.S., just to kind of wrap up, we're all quite wealthy. And whether we realize it or not, we have the same risks as this foolish man. As we drive around, we see self-storage containers everywhere. We have 2, 3-car garages. We all have much more than we need. I think it was about 10 years ago, during Christmas time, we volunteered to deliver something to a family in South Central Los Angeles. I was worried about actually driving there. When we got there, much to my surprise, the family had a very large screen TV on their wall. It was much bigger than any TV I had in my house. And it made me think, we truly are a wealthy nation. We do have people who are in need of food, and we should take care of them. But by and large, even those who are poor here, most of the world would consider wealthy. So whether consciously or unconsciously, we tend to accumulate far more than we need or can store. Due to our long average lifespan and modern medicine, we tend to ignore that our life is brief. I'm not saying to focus on the fact that every day could be your last. I'm just saying that with a little more focus like that, we would probably serve the Lord more and be more generous with the things that He gave us. Occasionally, we're snapped into reality regarding our brief time here. It's easy to forget that this is a temporary home. We're called sojourners here, that our home is really in a place that we cannot see. And it's in that home where we're called to store our goods. We're not discouraged from saving. Saving is prudent. But we're warned that if we're not rich with God, there will be consequences, possibly now and most certainly in the future. So I think we should all take heed to this warning that we've been delivered today. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, your word brings truth and hope and life. We thank you for your word and the comfort that it gives us. We thank you for the promises you've given us, Lord, and for the thought that one day we'll see you face to face in all your glory. Help us to keep our eyes on you and the spiritual world, the immaterial world, even more, Lord, than we keep our eyes on the here and now. In Jesus' name, amen.